Maria Santos walked slowly down the dark streets of downtown Chicago. Her worn-out sneakers had holes in them, and the cold October wind cut through her thin jacket like a knife. She carried a small backpack with everything she owned in the world: a change of clothes, a water bottle, and the last $10 she had earned from cleaning windows at the corner gas station. At 19 years old, Maria had been living on the streets for 3 months. Her foster family had kicked her out when she turned 18, and she had no money for college or even a small apartment. Every day was a struggle to find food and a safe place to sleep. The city was dangerous at night, especially for a young woman alone. As she walked past an expensive hotel, Maria noticed how different her life was from the people going in and out. They wore beautiful clothes and drove fancy cars. She pressed her hand against her empty stomach and tried not to think about how hungry she was. The street lamps cast long shadows as Maria made her way toward the park where she usually spent the night. She had found a hidden spot behind some bushes where the security guards couldn't see her. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sleeping completely in the open. Suddenly, Maria heard a sound that made her stop walking. It was a low groan, like someone in terrible pain. She looked around and saw a figure lying on the sidewalk near a dark alley. At first, she thought it might be another homeless person, but something seemed different. Maria's heart started beating faster. She knew she should just keep walking. The streets were full of dangerous people, and getting involved could mean trouble. But the sound of pain made her think of all the times she had been hurt and alone, wishing someone would help her. She took a few careful steps toward the person on the ground. As she got closer, she could see it was a young man, probably around her age. He was wearing expensive clothes, a black leather jacket and dark jeans that looked brand new. His dark hair was messy, and his skin looked very pale in the streetlight. "Hey, are you okay?" Maria called out softly, staying a safe distance away. The young man turned his head toward her voice, and Maria gasped. His eyes were an unusual bright blue color that seemed to glow in the darkness. But what scared her most was how sick he looked. His face was twisted in pain, and he was breathing very hard. "Please," he whispered, his voice so quiet Maria could barely hear it. "Help me." Maria looked around the empty street. No one else was around to help. She could call 911, but she knew that would bring police, and she tried to avoid them since living on the streets was illegal in many places. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, moving a little closer. "I need..." the young man started to say, but then he coughed violently. Maria saw something that made her blood run cold. When he coughed, his teeth looked different, longer and sharper than normal teeth should be. Every instinct told Maria to run away as fast as she could. But looking at the young man's face, she saw something that stopped her. Behind the strange appearance and the pain, she saw the same kind of loneliness and fear that she felt every day. "I won't hurt you," he said, as if he could read her thoughts. "I promise. I just need help getting somewhere safe." Maria stood there for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. She had so little in her life, and helping a stranger could put her in danger. But she also knew what it felt like to need help and have everyone walk past without caring. "Where do you need to go?" she asked finally. The young man tried to sit up but fell back down with another groan of pain. "There's a building about 6 blocks from here. Old brick building with a red door. Can you help me get there?" Maria looked at him carefully. He was taller than her and probably stronger, even in his current condition. If he wanted to hurt her, he probably could. But something in his eyes made her believe that he really just needed help. "What's your name?" she asked. "David," he said. "David Blackwood." "I'm Maria. Maria Santos." She took a deep breath and made her decision. "I'll help you, but if you try anything weird, I'm running away." David managed a small smile. "Thank you, Maria. I won't forget this." Maria helped David stand up. He was heavier than she expected, and she struggled to support his weight. They started walking slowly down the street together. David leaned on her heavily, and she could feel how cold his skin was, even through his jacket. "What happened to you?" Maria asked as they walked. David was quiet for a moment. It's complicated. My father and we had a fight. He cut me off from everything I need to survive. What do you mean, everything you need to survive? I can't explain right now, David said, breathing hard from the effort of walking. But, without it, I get very sick. Eventually, I could die. Maria didn't understand what he was talking about, but she could see that he was telling the truth about being sick. His skin was getting paler, and he was shaking. They walked for about 20 minutes, stopping frequently when David needed to rest. Maria's shoulders ached from supporting his weight, but she didn't complain. She kept thinking about all the times people had walked past her when she needed help. That's the building, David said, pointing to an old brick building with a red door, just like he had described. But, when they reached the door, David's face fell. It's locked. I don't have my key. Maybe we can call someone? Maria suggested. No phone, David said weakly. And, no money. My father took everything when he kicked me out. Maria stared at him. You're homeless too? Not exactly homeless. But, yes, I have nowhere to go tonight. Looking at David's expensive clothes, Maria found it hard to believe that he had no money. But, she could see that he was desperate. His breathing was getting worse, and he looked like he might collapse again. There's a place I stay sometimes, Maria said. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You could rest there until morning. David looked surprised. You would do that for a stranger? You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Maria said. Besides, I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. Maria led David to an old abandoned warehouse on the edge of downtown. She had discovered it a few weeks earlier and had been using it as a backup shelter when the weather was bad. The building was empty except for some old boxes and machinery, but it was dry and out of the wind. She helped David sit down against one of the walls and gave him her extra jacket to use as a pillow. Then, she sat down nearby, keeping some distance between them just in case. Thank you, David said. You don't know how much this means to me. Why don't you tell me what really happened? Maria asked. I told you I'm homeless. You can trust me with the truth. David looked at her for a long time, as if trying to decide something important. My father is a very powerful man, he said finally. He has control over everything in my life. When I disobeyed him, he decided to teach me a lesson by cutting me off from the family resources. What did you do that made him so angry? I refused to hurt someone, David said quietly. Someone innocent. My father wanted me to do something terrible, and, when I said no, he told me I wasn't worthy to be his son anymore. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of terrible thing? David closed his eyes. I can't tell you everything. It would put you in danger. But, my father and his family, they're not like other people. They have power that most humans can't imagine. Humans? Maria repeated. What do you mean, humans? David opened his eyes and looked directly at her. In the dim light of the warehouse, his eyes seemed to glow even brighter. Maria, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But I need you to understand why I'm so sick, and why my father's punishment is so cruel. Maria's heart started beating faster again. What are you talking about? My father is what people call a vampire king, David said. And I am his son. Maria stared at him in shock. Vampires aren't real. That's just stuff from movies and books. I thought you might say that, David said sadly. But think about what you've seen tonight. My pale skin, my strange eyes, my teeth, the way I get sick without certain things I need to survive. Maria remembered the glimpse of his teeth when he coughed, and how cold his skin felt. She also remembered how his eyes seemed to glow in the dark. Even if that's true, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, why are you telling me? Aren't vampires supposed to be dangerous? Most are, David admitted. But I'm different. I've never hurt an innocent person, and I never want to. That's why my father is angry with me. What did he want you to do? David looked away. He wanted me to prove my loyalty by attacking someone. A young woman, not much older than you. I refused, and he banished me from the family. Without access to what we need to survive, I'll eventually become too weak to live. Maria felt confused and scared, but also curious. What do you need to survive? Blood, David said simply. But not the way most people think. We don't have to kill anyone. We can survive on small amounts, given willingly. My father has arrangements with people who provide what we need in exchange for protection and money. So you're really a vampire? Maria asked, still hardly believing it. Half vampire, David corrected. My mother was human. That's why I'm different from the rest of my father's family. I have more human feelings and conscience. Maria sat in silence, trying to process everything David had told her. Part of her wanted to run away as fast as she could. But another part of her felt sorry for him. If what he said was true, then he was just as lost and alone as she was. How long can you survive without blood? She asked. A few days at most, David said. I'm already getting weaker. By tomorrow night, I'll probably be too sick to move. What happens then? I don't know. Maybe I die, or maybe I become something worse. My father never explained all the details. Maria looked at David's pale face and saw that he was telling the truth about getting sicker. Even in the short time they had been talking, he looked worse. There has to be something we can do, she said. Why do you care? David asked. You could just leave right now and never see me again. It would be safer for you. Maria thought about his question. She didn't really know why she cared about helping someone who claimed to be a vampire. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be rejected by family. Maybe it was because she was tired of feeling helpless all the time. Because everyone deserves a chance, she said finally. And because you helped me realize that I'm not the only one who feels lost and alone. David smiled, and, for a moment, he looked less like a dangerous creature and more like a scared young man. Thank you, Maria. Even if nothing else happens, meeting you tonight has shown me that there are still good people in the world. As the night went on, Maria and David continued talking. He told her more about his unusual family and the world of vampires that most humans never knew existed. Maria told him about her life on the streets and her dreams of someday having a real home and family. Despite the strange circumstances, Maria found herself feeling more comfortable with David than she had with anyone in a long time. He listened to her stories without judging her, and he seemed to genuinely care about her problems. I have an idea, Maria said as dawn approached. What if we went to see your father together? David shook his head. That would be incredibly dangerous for you. My father doesn't like humans, especially humans who know our secrets. But what if I could convince him to give you another chance? Parents sometimes listen to outsiders when they won't listen to their own children. Maria, you don't understand how powerful and dangerous my father is. He's ruled over other vampires for hundreds of years. He's not going to change his mind because a homeless girl asks him to. Maybe not, Maria said. But I have to try. I can't just let you die when there might be something I can do to help. David looked at her with amazement. You would really risk your life for someone you just met? You helped me tonight too, Maria pointed out. You showed me that I'm braver than I thought I was. And you treated me like I mattered, even though I have nothing to offer you. As the sun came up, both Maria and David fell asleep in the warehouse. But Maria's dreams were full of plans and possibilities. For the first time in months, she felt like she had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. When she woke up in the afternoon, David looked even worse than before. His skin was almost white, and he could barely keep his eyes open. We have to do something, Maria said. You're running out of time. David tried to sit up but couldn't. Maria, I need to tell you where my father lives. If something happens to me, maybe you can find him and tell him what happened. Not to help me, but so he knows that his punishment worked. Nothing's going to happen to you, Maria said firmly. We're going to figure this out together. But, even as she said it, Maria could see that David was fading fast. She had to make a decision quickly, before it was too late to save him. Maria made her decision quickly. She couldn't watch David die when there might be something she could do to help him. Even if it meant facing a dangerous vampire king, she had to try. "Tell me where your father lives," she said. David's voice was so weak she had to lean close to hear him. "The Blackwood Tower. It's the tall black building downtown with the red lights at the top." "But, Maria, please don't go there. He'll kill you." "We'll see about that," Maria said, trying to sound braver than she felt. She helped David drink some water from her bottle and covered him with both their jackets. "I'll be back as soon as I can. Just hold on." The walk downtown took Maria almost an hour. She had seen the Blackwood Tower before but had never paid much attention to it. Now, looking up at the imposing black glass building that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, she felt very small and scared. The lobby was filled with marble and expensive furniture. Maria felt out of place in her dirty clothes and worn-out shoes. A security guard at the front desk looked at her suspiciously. "Can I help you?" he asked in a tone that suggested he wanted her to leave. "I need to see Mr. Blackwood," Maria said, trying to sound confident. The guard laughed. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't see people without appointments. Especially not people like you. It's about his son David. It's an emergency." The guard's expression changed slightly. He picked up a phone and spoke quietly into it. After a few minutes, he hung up and looked at Maria with surprise. "Someone will be down to get you," he said. 5 minutes later, a tall woman in an expensive black suit stepped out of an elevator. She had pale skin and dark hair, and her eyes were the same unusual blue color as David's. "You're the one asking about David," she said, looking Maria up and down with obvious distaste. "Yes. Are you his mother?" The woman laughed coldly. "I'm his aunt, Catherine Blackwood. His mother died when he was young. What do you want?" "I need to talk to your brother about David. He's very sick and needs help." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about our family business?" "I know that David is dying because his father cut him off from what he needs to survive. And I know that he's dying because he refused to hurt an innocent person." "Interesting," Catherine said. "Come with me. My brother will want to meet you." The elevator ride to the top floor seemed to take forever. Maria's stomach felt sick with nervousness. She kept thinking about David getting weaker in the warehouse and hoped she wasn't making a terrible mistake. The elevator opened into a huge office with windows on all sides. The view of the city was amazing, but Maria barely noticed it. Her attention was focused on the man sitting behind a massive desk at the far end of the room. Marcus Blackwood was tall and imposing, with jet black hair and the same glowing blue eyes as his son and sister. But, where David's eyes had shown kindness, his father's eyes were cold and calculating. He wore an expensive black suit and looked like he could be anywhere from 30 to 60 years old. "So," Marcus said, his voice deep and commanding, "you're the human girl who thinks she can interfere in vampire family matters." Maria's legs felt shaky, but she forced herself to walk closer to his desk. "Your son is dying. Don't you care?" Marcus stood up and walked around the desk. He was much taller than Maria, and she had to tilt her head back to look at him. She could feel power radiating from him like heat from a fire. "My son chose to defy me," Marcus said. "He chose to put his human weakness above family loyalty. Now he learns the consequences. He chose not to hurt someone innocent," Maria shot back. "How is that weakness?" Marcus's eyes flashed dangerously. "Because in our world, sentiment and mercy are weaknesses that get you killed. David needs to learn that if he wants to survive. But he won't survive. He'll die first. Then, perhaps he wasn't worthy to be my heir anyway." Maria stared at Marcus in shock. "You're really willing to let your own son die?" "I've lived for over 500 years, Marcus said. "I've had many sons. The weak ones don't survive." Maria felt anger building inside her. "David told me about your test. You wanted him to attack an innocent girl just to prove his loyalty. What kind of father asks their child to do something like that? The kind of father who rules over one of the most powerful vampire families in the world, Marcus replied. The kind who has to ensure that his heir can make the hard choices that leadership requires. Leadership shouldn't require hurting innocent people. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You naive little girl. Do you think the world runs on kindness and good intentions? Power requires sacrifice. It requires being willing to do whatever is necessary. David is willing to die rather than hurt someone. Doesn't that show more strength than just following orders? Marcus moved closer to Maria, and she could feel the danger radiating from him. It shows that he's been corrupted by his human heritage. His mother filled his head with foolish ideas about morality and conscience. Maybe his mother was right, Maria said, even though her voice was shaking. For a moment, Marcus looked so angry that Maria thought he might attack her right there. But, then, he seemed to control himself. You have courage, I'll give you that, he said. Most humans would be begging for their lives by now. What's your name? Maria Santos. Well, Maria Santos, let me explain something to you. David's punishment isn't just about teaching him a lesson. It's about showing the rest of my family what happens when someone defies me. If I show mercy to David, others might think they can disobey me too. So your pride is more important than your son's life? My authority is more important than one foolish boy's life, yes. Maria felt tears of frustration in her eyes. He's not just any foolish boy. He's your son. He stopped being my son when he chose to betray me. Maria realized that appeals to Marcus's parental feelings weren't going to work. She needed a different approach. What if there was another way, she said. What if David could prove his loyalty without hurting innocent people? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Give him a different test. Something that shows strength and loyalty but doesn't involve attacking innocent people. Such as? Maria's mind raced. She didn't know much about vampire culture, but she tried to think of what might impress someone like Marcus. What if he had to prove himself by protecting someone instead of hurting them, she suggested. Isn't it harder to keep someone safe than it is to attack them? Marcus considered this. Interesting idea. But, who would he protect, and from what? He could protect me, Maria said impulsively. I live on the streets. There are plenty of dangers he could protect me from. You? Marcus looked amused. What makes you think you're worth protecting? The question stung, but Maria forced herself to answer. Maybe I'm not worth much to you. But I was worth enough for David to help when he found me on the street. And I was worth enough to myself to come here and try to save his life. Marcus walked back to his desk and sat down. He studied Maria for a long moment. You realize that if I agreed to this, you would essentially become David's responsibility? He would be accountable for your safety. If anything happened to you, he would be considered a failure. I understand. And you would be entering a world that's very dangerous for humans. There are vampires in this city who would consider you nothing more than food. Maria swallowed hard. I understand that too. Why would you take such a risk for someone you barely know? Maria thought about all the people who had walked past her when she was hungry and alone. She thought about David's kindness and his willingness to choose death over hurting someone innocent. Because he's the first person in a long time who treated me like I mattered, she said. And because I think he could be a better leader than you are. Catherine gasped at Maria's boldness, but Marcus just smiled coldly. Bold words from a homeless girl with nothing to lose. I do have something to lose, Maria said. I have my life. And I'm willing to risk it to save someone who deserves to live. Marcus stood up again and walked to the windows. He looked out at the city for several minutes while Maria waited nervously. Catherine, he said finally, what do you think of this girl's proposal? Catherine looked surprised to be asked. It's unusual, brother. But it might serve our purposes. David would have to prove he can protect someone weaker than himself, and the girl would be expendable if things go wrong. Thank you for that vote of confidence, Maria said sarcastically. Catherine ignored her. It would also test whether David has learned anything from his punishment. If he fails to protect the girl, he learns that his mercy has consequences. If he succeeds, he proves he can be responsible for others. Marcus nodded slowly. There's wisdom in that. Very well, Maria Santos. I'll make you a deal. Maria's heart started beating faster. David will have 30 days to prove he can protect you from 3 challenges of my choosing. If he succeeds, I'll welcome him back into the family and provide what he needs to survive. If he fails, or if you die during the challenges, then his punishment becomes permanent. What kind of challenges? That will remain my secret. But I promise you they will be dangerous. David will have to use all his vampire abilities and intelligence to keep you safe. Maria thought about this. It wasn't exactly what she had hoped for, but it was better than watching David die. And David gets what he needs to survive during these 30 days? Enough to function, yes. But not enough to be at full strength. He'll have to succeed while still being weaker than normal. That doesn't seem fair. Marcus laughed. Life isn't fair, child. Take the deal or watch David die. Those are your options. Maria knew she didn't really have a choice. I accept. Excellent. Catherine will take you back to wherever David is. We'll begin the first challenge tomorrow night. As they rode the elevator back down, Catherine looked at Maria with something that might have been respect. You're either very brave or very stupid, she said. Probably both, Maria admitted. For what it's worth, I think David is lucky to have found someone willing to fight for him. He's always been my favorite nephew. Then, why didn't you speak up for him before? Catherine sighed. Because Marcus is the head of our family, and his word is law. I can't openly oppose him without risking my own position. But that doesn't mean I want to see David die. When they reached the warehouse, David was barely conscious. Catherine took one look at him and shook her head. He's worse than I expected. We need to get him some blood immediately. Catherine opened a small bag she had brought with her and took out what looked like a medical pouch of blood. Hospital donation, she explained to Maria. We have arrangements. She helped David drink some of the blood, and, within minutes, his color started to improve. He was still weak, but he could sit up and speak clearly. Maria, he said, looking confused. What happened? And, Catherine, what are you doing here? Your little friend here convinced your father to give you another chance, Catherine said. Though I'm not sure she did you any favors. Maria explained the deal she had made with Marcus. David's face grew more worried as she talked. Maria, you don't understand what you've agreed to, he said. My father's challenges won't just be difficult. They'll be designed to be nearly impossible. Then, we'll have to make sure we succeed anyway, Maria said. We're in this together now. I'm not going to let you face whatever comes next alone. David looked at her with amazement and gratitude. Why would you risk your life for me? Because, Maria said, sitting down next to him, everyone deserves someone who believes in them. And I believe you can be the kind of leader who protects people instead of hurting them. Catherine watched their interaction with interest. You know, she said, this might actually work. David, you've always been stronger when you have someone to protect. And, Maria, you've shown more courage today than most vampires show in their entire lives. What do you think the first challenge will be? David asked. Knowing Marcus, it will be something that tests both your abilities and your commitment to protecting Maria. He'll want to see if you're really willing to put her safety above your own. As night fell, the 3 of them prepared for whatever would come next. Maria had committed herself to a dangerous path, but, for the first time in months, she felt like she was part of something important. David was still weak from his father's punishment, and the challenges ahead would be dangerous. But Maria had faith that together, they could prove that mercy and protection were stronger than cruelty and power. The next morning, Catherine returned with a message from Marcus.
The first challenge would begin that evening at midnight.
David and Maria were to come to an abandoned section of the city's old industrial district.
He's not going to tell us what we're facing? David asked.
Marcus believes that uncertainty makes people stronger, Catherine said.
You'll have to be ready for anything.
The day passed slowly. David used the time to rest and regain some strength from the blood Catherine had brought.
Maria tried to prepare herself mentally for whatever was coming.
I want you to know, David said as evening approached, that no matter what happens tonight, meeting you has changed my life. You've shown me that there are still people worth protecting in this world.
Don't talk like we're not going to make it through this, Maria said.
We're going to succeed, and then, you're going to get the chance to be the kind of leader you want to be.
As midnight approached, David and Maria made their way to the meeting point.
The old industrial district was dark and empty, full of abandoned factories and empty warehouses. It felt like the kind of place where bad things happened. They found Marcus waiting for them in the middle of an empty parking lot.
He wasn't alone.
3 other vampires stood with him, all of them looking dangerous and hostile. David, Maria, Marcus said as they approached.
Welcome to your first challenge.
Maria felt her heart racing as she looked at the 3 vampires standing with Marcus. They all had the same pale skin and glowing eyes as the Blackwood family, but their expressions were cruel and hungry. One of them, a woman with long red hair, was staring at Maria like she was looking at her next meal. Let me explain the first challenge, Marcus said, his voice echoing in the empty parking lot. David, you have 1 hour to get Maria from here to the old cathedral on 5th Street. That's approximately 3 miles through some of the most dangerous parts of the city.
That doesn't sound too difficult, Maria whispered to David.
Marcus heard her and smiled coldly.
I haven't finished. Elena, Victor, and James here will be hunting you.
They have orders to capture Maria and bring her back here. If they succeed, you both fail the challenge. The red-haired woman, Elena, laughed.
This will be fun.
It's been too long since we had a good hunt. The rules are simple, Marcus continued.
David cannot seriously harm the hunters. Maria cannot be left alone at any point during the journey.
And you must reach the cathedral before dawn, which is in exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. David stepped protectively in front of Maria.
What happens if we succeed?
Then, you pass the first challenge.
You'll have 2 more to complete over the next month. And if we fail? Marcus's smile grew wider.
Then, Elena, Victor, and James get to keep whatever they catch.
Maria understood the threat immediately.
If David failed to protect her, she would become prey for the 3 vampires hunting them.
David, she said quietly, can you handle 3 vampires at once? Not easily, he admitted. Especially since I'm still weak from Father's punishment. But I have some advantages. I know this city better than they do, and I have you to motivate me.
Marcus stepped back, and the 3 hunting vampires spread out to surround David and Maria. Your hour starts now, Marcus announced. David immediately grabbed Maria's hand.
Run, he said.
They sprinted out of the parking lot and into the maze of abandoned buildings. Behind them, Maria could hear the hunters giving them a head start, probably to make the chase more interesting.
Where are we going? Maria asked as they ran through a dark alley between 2 factories.
I know a route through the old subway tunnels, David said. It's longer, but it will be harder for them to track us underground. They reached a grating that led down into the abandoned subway system. David tore it open with strength that no normal human could have managed, and they climbed down into the darkness. The tunnels were pitch black, but David seemed to be able to see perfectly. He guided Maria through the maze of passages, moving quickly but carefully.
How much time do we have left? Maria asked after they had been running for what felt like forever. David checked his phone. 45 minutes.
We're making good time, but they'll have figured out where we went by now. As if he had summoned them, they heard voices echoing through the tunnels behind them. They found us, Maria said. This way, David said, pulling her down a side passage. There's an old maintenance room up ahead where we can hide for a few minutes and plan our next move. The maintenance room was small and filled with rusted pipes and old electrical equipment. David and Maria crouched behind a large boiler and tried to catch their breath. "I can hear them getting closer," Maria whispered. "What if they catch us?" "They won't," David said firmly. "I won't let them." "But, you said you can't seriously hurt them. How can you stop 3 vampires without hurting them?" David smiled for the first time since the challenge began. "Who says I have to fight them? Sometimes the best way to win is to avoid the fight altogether." He pulled out his phone and started typing quickly. "What are you doing?" "Calling in a favor. Catherine isn't the only member of my family who thinks father goes too far sometimes." A few minutes later, they heard new voices in the tunnels. But these voices sounded angry, and they were arguing with the hunters. "What's happening?" Maria asked. "I called my cousin Robert. He brought some of his friends to distract the hunters." They could hear sounds of a struggle echoing through the tunnels. It wasn't a real fight, but it was enough confusion to give David and Maria the chance they needed. "Come on," David said. "While they're busy arguing, we can get to the surface." They climbed out of the subway tunnels 6 blocks closer to the cathedral. The streets were still dangerous, but they had cut their travel time significantly. 20 minutes left, David said, checking his phone again. But, as they hurried down the street, Elena appeared in front of them. Her red hair was messy from the confusion in the tunnels, and she looked angry. "Very clever," she said to David. "But now it's just you, me, and the little human girl." David pushed Maria behind him. "Leave her alone, Elena. Your fight is with me. My orders are to capture the girl. You can either step aside or watch what happens to her." "Never," David said. Elena laughed and moved faster than Maria's eyes could follow. But David was ready for her. He caught her arm as she lunged toward Maria and spun her away. "Run, Maria," he shouted. "The cathedral is just 3 blocks straight ahead." "I'm not leaving you," Maria shouted back. "You have to. That's the only way we both win." Maria hesitated for a moment, torn between wanting to help David and knowing he was right. Finally, she ran toward the cathedral as fast as she could. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of David and Elena fighting. David was trying not to seriously hurt Elena, but she had no such restrictions. Maria prayed that David's motivation to protect her would be enough to help him win. She reached the cathedral with 5 minutes to spare, but David wasn't with her. Maria stood on the steps, looking back down the street and hoping to see him coming. 2 minutes before the deadline, David appeared at the end of the street. He was walking slowly and looked hurt, but he was alive. Elena was nowhere to be seen. "David!" Maria ran to meet him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said, though Maria could see scratches on his face and his jacket was torn. Elena decided that the challenge wasn't worth getting more hurt than she already was. They walked up the steps of the cathedral together just as Marcus appeared with Catherine and the other vampires. "Impressive," Marcus said, looking genuinely surprised. "I didn't expect you to succeed quite so easily." "It wasn't easy," David said. "But Maria is worth protecting." Marcus studied both of them carefully. "Yes, I'm beginning to see that." "Very well, you've passed the first challenge. You have 1 week to rest before the second challenge begins." Over the next week, Catherine helped David regain more of his strength with regular supplies of blood. Maria stayed in a safe house that belonged to the Blackwood family, where she learned more about vampire culture and politics. "The second challenge will probably be more difficult," Catherine warned them. "Marcus will want to test whether your success was just luck." She was right. The second challenge involved protecting Maria during a formal vampire gathering where several of Marcus's enemies would try to use her as a way to get to David. It required not just physical protection, but political intelligence and social skills. David had to navigate complex vampire politics while keeping Maria safe from creatures who were older, stronger, and more experienced than he was. But, with Maria's help, he managed to turn potential enemies into allies and ended the evening with new supporters for his eventual leadership. the third and final challenge was the most dangerous. Marcus arranged for Maria to be kidnapped by a group of rogue vampires who didn't recognize the Blackwood family's authority. David had to rescue her from a fortified position while outnumbered and outgunned. But, by this point, David had regained most of his strength, and his experience protecting Maria had made him more confident and focused than he had ever been. More importantly, he had learned to work with a team. Catherine, Robert, and several other family members had come to respect both David and Maria, and they helped with the rescue mission. The final confrontation took place in an old warehouse similar to the one where Maria had first helped David. But, this time, David wasn't weak and alone. He had allies, purpose, and someone worth fighting for. Maria watched from her hiding place as David led the attack on her captors. He was faster, stronger, and smarter than she had ever seen him. But, most importantly, he fought with precision and control. He defeated the rogue vampires without killing anyone, proving that strength and mercy could work together. When it was over, and Maria was safe, Marcus appeared with the rest of the Vampire Council. "Well done," he said to David. "You've proven that you can protect those under your care, lead others effectively, and show strength without unnecessary cruelty." "Does this mean I'm welcome back in the family?" David asked. Marcus nodded. "It means more than that. You've proven that you're ready to start taking on real leadership responsibilities. And you, Maria Santos, have proven that humans can be valuable allies rather than just food or servants." Maria felt a mixture of relief and pride. They had done it. They had passed all three challenges and proven that David's way of leadership could work. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Catherine said, "you both have choices to make. David, your father is offering you a position as head of security for the family's human-related operations. You would be responsible for protecting the humans who work with us and ensuring they are treated fairly. And, Maria," Marcus added, "you've impressed the Vampire Council. We're prepared to offer you a position as a liaison between our family and the human community. You would help us build better relationships with humans and ensure that our agreements benefit both sides." Maria looked at David. "What do you think?" "I think," David said, "that we make a good team. And I think we could do a lot of good working together. But, what about my dream of going to college and having a normal life? Who says you can't do both?" Catherine asked. "We have resources. We could help you get an education while you work with us. And, your life will never be completely normal, but it could be much better than living on the streets." Maria thought about everything that had happened over the past month. She had gone from being a homeless girl with no hope for the future to being someone who had influenced a powerful vampire family and helped change their approach to dealing with humans. "I accept," she said. "Excellent," Marcus said. "But, there's one more matter to discuss. Maria, you've been exposed to our family secrets and our world. That means you can't just walk away if you change your mind later." "What does that mean?" "It means," David explained, "that you're now under our family's protection permanently. But, it also means you're bound to us. You can't reveal our secrets to other humans, and you can't leave without permission." Maria felt a moment of fear. "So I'm basically a prisoner?" "More like a member of the family," Catherine said. "You'll have freedom within limits. And, you'll have protection, resources, and purpose. It's not the life you planned, but it might be better than what you hoped for." Looking around at the vampires who had become her allies, and at David who had become much more than a friend, Maria realized that Catherine was right. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was a life where she mattered, where she could make a difference, and where she had people who cared about her. "Okay," she said. "I can live with that." 6 months later, Maria was enrolled in night classes at the university, studying international relations and conflict resolution. During the day, she worked with David to improve relations between the Blackwood family and the human community. They had developed programs to help homeless people like Maria had been, created fair employment opportunities for humans who wanted to work with vampires, and established safety protocols to protect humans who entered the vampire world. David had grown into his role as a leader, earning respect from both vampires and humans. His approach of protection rather than domination was gradually changing how the entire family operated. Maria often thought about that night when she had found David collapsed on the street. If she had just walked past him like everyone had always walked past her, both their lives would have been completely different.
"Do you ever regret helping me that night?" David asked her one evening as they walked through the city.
"Never," Maria said.
"Do you regret trusting a homeless stranger?"
"Best decision I ever made," David replied. They stopped in front of the warehouse where Maria had first sheltered David. It had been converted into a community center that provided services for homeless people and others who needed help.
"Look how far we've come," Maria said.
"This is just the beginning," David said.
"We've proven that vampires and humans can work together.
Now we need to expand that to other vampire families and communities. One step at a time," Maria said.
"We've got the rest of our lives to change the world."
As they walked away from the warehouse, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed. She had gone from having nothing and no one to having a purpose, a family, and someone who cared about her deeply. The vampire world was dangerous and complicated, but it was also full of possibilities. And, with David beside her, Maria felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Marcus had been right about one thing: the world didn't run on kindness and good intentions alone. But Maria and David had proven that kindness and good intentions, combined with courage and determination, could create powerful changes. They had started as two lost souls helping each other survive. Now they were partners working to build a better future for both vampires and humans.
And that future looked brighter every day.